What is happening to U.S. democracy under Trump? Some warn of a shift where institutions remain but are manipulated to consolidate power. Allies get protection and benefits while opponents face lawsuits, regulations, and financial ruin. Critics say the government is targeting media, universities, and civil servants to weaken checks and balances. We're going to have more on that in just a moment, but first, this report on Trump's strategy to entrench his power.
Alleged Venezuelan gang members being deported, landing in El Salvador, headed for a massive high-security prison. In defiance of a U.S. federal judge's order, a case that's now landed at the Supreme Court. The Trump administration's refusal to obey the judge's order has led to talk of a constitutional crisis. But the White House and the cabinet have many other ways to consolidate power, operating within the Constitution. The immense power of the executive branch gives the president many ways to reward friends and punish enemies. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán is widely cited as a model. Friends have benefited from public contracts. He's been able to shut down the opposition by cowing the judiciary, intimidating the media, and closing universities. The Trump administration has taken similar steps in its early months in office. Rewarding friends like Elon Musk, Trump's biggest campaign contributor. Trump announced he would buy a Tesla and lavished praise on the vehicles produced by Musk's company. The Justice Department, meanwhile, says that attacks on Tesla cars and dealerships will be investigated as domestic terrorism. Restructuring the government. Musk's so-called Department of Government Efficiency, which isn't a department at all, just as Musk is not an elected official, has been firing people across agencies, and in some cases forcing closures. Many of these, like foreign aid and consumer protection agencies, are perceived as left-leaning or woke by conservatives. The media has been called the enemy of the people by Trump and his allies. He's personally sued ABC News for defamation. Some media owners have distanced their companies from controversy before trouble could result. The Washington Post, owned by Amazon founder Jeff Bezos, opted not to publish an endorsement of Trump's presidential rival, Kamala Harris, before the election. Elite universities have also long been seen as hotbeds of leftist woke thought. Trump's administration has clamped down on private schools like Columbia University, canceling funding for medical research unless the school makes very specific changes to its policies. Columbia has agreed to some demands and is in negotiations, setting an example for other schools. Deportations aren't just for migrants suspected of being gang members. Foreign students who have legal residence but who are accused of supporting Hamas have found themselves in detention, locked in legal battles to stay in the country. Those early actions make it clear that, for some at least, there is a price to pay for being in the opposition and a reward for playing along. Meanwhile, Trump has promised that what's happened so far is only the beginning.
My next guest says the Trump administration is now engaged in a campaign to terrorize and destroy American higher education. And he warns Trump 2.0 could be a fascist regime in the making, the hallmarks of which he outlines in several books, including his most recent, Erasing History, How Fascists Rewrite the Past to Control the Future, and his 2018 book, How Fascism Works, The Politics of Us and Them. The author and Yale philosophy professor Jason Stanley joins me now. Professor, it's good to have you with us. You have a very compelling personal story, which I would like to discuss in just a moment. But first, I'd like to ask you to put on your teaching hat for just a moment for us. You know as well as I do that labels are being thrown around all the time now. Fascist, socialist, capitalist, and many times people, they don't know what these labels really mean. Could you explain what is fascism, and then tell us where you see it emerging in the Trump administration?
Fascism is what the Trump administration is now doing. There was last decade had kind of what we call the fascism debate, where people were like, is this just authoritarianism or is it fascism? And in a way, my own view now is we need to get away. There's a total waste of time, because it's very clear that what we're seeing is dangerous far right authoritarianism, and no one should care at all what you call it. But labels like right wing authoritarianism, or labels like populism, right wing populism, are really bad because they don't convey the threat. They're ways of whitewashing the threat. What we have is a far right authoritarianism. I've argued in detail in my book that it fits the label of fascism, but I really think it's a distraction right now.
Let's bring this into higher education. The Trump administration is threatening to withhold funds from universities because it says these universities have failed to fight anti-Semitism. The administration says it's acting to protect Jews in America. What do you say to that?
I asked my class yesterday at Yale University who knew Jewish students at Yale who participated in the anti-war protests and encampments last year. And, the majority of students raised their hands. Jewish students at Yale were one of the biggest identity groups participating in the encampments and the protests. The administration, this regime, is drawing a distinction between good Jews and bad Jews, and we know the history of that. The good Jews are right-wing Jews who are pro-Israel. The bad Jews are people like me and many of my students here at Yale who criticize Israel's actions in Gaza as genocidal actions. Or at least, demand a ceasefire. So the Trump administration is, as usual, appealing to stereotypes. Here they're appealing to a very dangerous anti-Semitic stereotype that we American Jews control the institutions. They're leaning into that stereotype and saying, see what happens when you cross Jews, they destroy you. So that, of course, increases anti-Semitism. It makes us much less safe. It's obviously an anti-Semitic attack on anti-Semitism. It's using us as the sledgehammer of fascism, and that is wrong and dangerous for us.
But you're seeing universities, I'm thinking of Columbia University, that they have given in to the president's demands, and they're changing things because they were afraid of losing the money. And, a university can't really do anything without money. I mean, would you agree to that?
No. A university, if you agree to these demands, you're not a university anymore. A university is not some buildings and a name. A university is a place of free inquiry and critical inquiry. And in the United States, given our relationship to Israel, it's perfectly legitimate to have a protest movement that demands divestment from military support of Israel. You might agree or disagree with it, but dragging students off the street to deport them to Louisiana prisons because they've co-authored op-eds, criticizing Israel, that's authoritarian. So universities need, like other democratic institutions, to band together and defend democracy.
Let's talk about your university. You have been at Yale since 2013, and that is about to change. You're leaving Yale and the United States. And can I say, would it be correct to say that you're getting out while you can?
No, I have no fear at all. And Yale has protected its scholars. And, we could be speaking up more loudly, but Yale is really committed to protecting its scholars. And we've done really well and much better than an institution like Columbia, which forced Catherine Frank to retire, a very distinguished law professor there. So Yale's done a great job. I'm not afraid of I am afraid of being targeted a little by the federal government, but I think Yale's done a great job. I'm leaving because my non-citizen colleagues cannot speak about politics on social media or elsewhere, or else they might have their visas pulled. And our international students, our international students might not be able to get through the border. And I'm seeing the Monk School at the University of Toronto, where we're planning on creating the world's top center for defending democracy, bringing journalists in from democratically, but from authoritarian countries like Russia and the United States, bringing in journalists, training them, and strategizing with them. And the University of Toronto and Canadian universities obviously are going to benefit from this tremendous pressure placed on American universities.
Well, let me ask you, let me play devil's advocate a little bit. Why not stay at Yale and fight the good fight where the battle lines are being drawn?
Well, it's kind of easier to defend Canada than it is to defend Yale. So I could spend a lot of time defending this institution, or I could be happy with, my institution could not be under attack, and I could just defend democracy. And then, we academia is a meritocracy. I have the privilege to have this offer, and I believe the University of Toronto is going to be able to take advantage of this attack on our universities. And I believe the United States is getting to be a scary place generally, and University of Toronto can be a haven. We can bring scholars and journalists there to protect them better than we can do in the United States. Look, I'm going to be fighting for American democracy wherever I am.
Do you feel that going and living in Canada, will you and your family feel safer living there than you would if you stayed in the United States?
Well, I don't really want to talk about my personal situation that much. I have Black Jewish children, so I think I think that anti-Semitism is going to rise as a result of using us as a weapon against universities and obviously the attack on DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, is an attack on Black people in positions of power. So it's Black people are being targeted in positions of power. I want my kids to thrive. I don't want my kids to be attacked as in that way when they, if and when they do attain positions of power. And I don't want their histories to be erased. The attacks on Black history are an attack on them. So, and just to sort of so I'm not gonna, I want my kids to grow up in conditions of freedom.
Professor Jason Stanley, we appreciate you taking the time to talk with us about your situation and about the situation of the United States at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you.